Hello everyone, this is Pandy Knight, the Automation Panda. Today, I'm going to show you how to do full stack Python with HTMX. Here, I have a small web app called Bulldoggy, the Reminders app. When I log in, I can create reminders lists. For example, chores. For each reminders list, I can add a bunch of reminders items for things like buy groceries or walk the dog. For any of these items, I can click them to strike them out to indicate that I've completed them. I can edit these items as I see fit. And I can even delete items if I want to. I can have any number of reminders lists as well. And as you can see, all of the interactions being performed on this web page are done dynamically. The code for Bulldoggy is open source. You can find the repository at github.com/automationpanda/Bulldoggy reminders app. Let's take a look at how the Bulldoggy app was built. The model is stored in TinyDB with Pydantic models to expose it to the code. The controller is FastAPI. That's the web framework that is taking in the requests and returning the responses. The view is handled with Jinja templates and static files rendered in browsers. And then all of the dynamic interactions are handled with a library called HTMX. There's also a REST API with OpenAPI specs if you want to directly access the reminders data via some sort of client. And all of this is tested using Playwright with PyTest. Now, as you might notice, this entire web app is full stack Python. All the various components are implemented in Python or with Python adjacent technologies. In fact, even those dynamic web apps did not need explicit JavaScript code, thanks to HTMX. Let's take a closer look at how those dynamic interactions happen. And specifically, let's see what it means to create a new list. When I click on the new list row, it'll turn into an input field that I can type things into. If we pop over into the code, that content area on the reminders page is delivered by a template named content.html. And that template has a whole bunch of HTML code, as well as some includes for different partials for other templates. So we can see here how ultimately it comes down to the list content will include a list row for every one of my reminder lists that's likely in my database. And then it will also have at the bottom that new list row, which is what we just clicked on. If we look at the new list row template, essentially this is a div that contains a paragraph element for the new list, as well as a little icon next to it for adding something. And that's what we saw before. Now, what might seem interesting here is that we have these extra HX- attributes. This is where HTMX comes in. Basically, HTMX enables us to make AJAX calls without explicitly writing any JavaScript. So what we can do is directly in HTML, we can supply information about certain resource paths to hit and what interactions they take. And on the back end, those resource paths will return more hypertext that we can immediately then render directly on our page. This takes the place of needing to use a big front-end framework like Angular or React or Vue. HTMX is much more lightweight, much simpler, and also a lot faster. So let's see what that means for this particular new list row. HX-get says, hey, I want to call the resource path here, reminders/new list row edit, with an HTTP GET request. And based on the HX-trigger, I want to call HTTP GET at this endpoint whenever there is a click interaction done on this div element. And then whatever this resource path returns from the request, I want to take that hypertext and swap it, HX swap, with the outer HTML of this particular element. So that's why when I clicked that new list row, it switched to something different. It switched to an input field. So let's trace this down. Let's see the reminders new list row edit endpoint within the app. I'm going to go into my Fast API code. It's under app, routers, and inside the reminders module. And if I look for the new list row edit get request, this is the resource or the router path for it. Get, there's a prefix for reminders for everything in this module, and then new list row edit. When I look at what happens inside for this router path, what it does is it will bundle up that request and then generate a template response from this particular partial. Partials reminders new list row edit. So it doesn't even do anything. It just is going to return some new hypertext. So let's take a look at new list row edit. And in here, oh my gosh, we've got some different hypertext. Only 26 lines, not too bad. But again, it's going to be a div. And this time the div is going to have an input. And it's going to have two new image icons that are going to be buttons. One for a check mark and one for an X. And so if we go back to our page, we can see when we click that, we got an input field that we can start typing things into, as well as the check marks and the X. If I were to click this check, what that's going to do is commit this as a new row and then make it the selected row. And then underneath of that, there will be another new list row if I wanted to add more lists after that. So let's see here. For the icon check circle, what happens with this? Whenever it is triggered with a click or even pressing the enter key on that input field from name, reminder, list name, which is this input, whenever I click or enter, this is going to trigger an HTTP post request to the reminders new list row resource path. We're going to also include some data with it. The HX include, when you give it a CSS selector for an input field, it will take the value of that input field and add it as a parameter being passed along. So that way you can take inputs and directly push them to your calls. Now this time when we get a response, we're not going to just replace this row. We are going to target another element, which is the CSS selector for the class reminders content. And we're going to swap that entire content there. Now this reminders content actually is the entire content body. We can see the class equals reminders content here. So let's trace this down real quick. New list row back in our reminders for the post. Post new list row. What this does is it will create a new list item with that reminders list that was passed in from the input field. It will make it the selected list, and then it will return whatever get reminders grid is. If we trace this function down, get reminders grid, it will build the full page context, which is all the reminders lists and the selected item, build the context, and then push that into the template for the full content. So essentially it regenerates the whole thing, and that will regenerate this. And now when it comes down to get the reminders list, there's that one new list that happens to be selected. And that's how everything gets dynamically rendered. And that's basically all there is to it for dynamic interactions with HTMX. HTMX democratizes front-end web development for all tech stacks, and it works wonderfully with Python. It embeds basic HTTP calls directly into HTML, and requests just need to return plain old hypertext. You don't need to learn complicated front-end frameworks just to make basic dynamic web interactions. Unfortunately, I can give only a brief introduction in this lightning talk. If you want to learn more about how to build and test full-stack Python web apps like Bulldoggy, please watch my keynote addresses from PyTexas 2023 and DjangoCon 2023. And thank you for watching today. Again, I'm Pandy Knight, the Automation Panda. Check out the Bulldoggy repository yourself, which has a QR code here, and give it a GitHub star to let me know if you like it. Thank you so much.